radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah, man, how you doing? Today's Wednesday, December 11th, 2019. 345 days into the new year. Just 20 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking? How you doing? How you doing? All right. I'm ready. Wednesday night on Fade to Black. That means a couple of things. One, we have a great guest. Two, tomorrow night is Fader night. And then I can head into the weekend and do housework. That's what that means. I'm excited. Yeah, man. All right, tonight, John Greenewald of the Black Vault is here. That's right. We're going to discuss his latest headlines over at the Black Vault. Got lots to cover. He's been doing a lot of great research and getting it done. We're going to be discussing the news and revelations from his recent articles over at the Black Vault about AATIP, ASAP, the DOD, TTSA, Louis Elizondo. Going to be going through all of that. We're going to be discussing Twitter wars tonight, and we've got a couple of other headlines and articles that he has released lately. We're going to discuss all of that. John began researching the secret inner workings of the United States government in 1996 at the tender age of 15. He targeted such groups as the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, the Air Force, Army, Navy, the NSA, DIA, countless others. Greenewald utilized the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to thousands of records. I don't know what the total is now, but I'm going to guess. I'm going to say, well, maybe we'll ask him. I'm going to say he's got 6 million documents. He's probably got another 2 million in his garage that haven't been scanned yet. He's accumulated an astonishing number of documents on the topics of UFOs and the JFK assassination, chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, and, of course, top-secret aircraft. And he's got a new book out. It is called Secrets of the Black Vault. You can check that out. The website is theblackvault.com. And he also thinks he's a radio host. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, John Greenewald. John, good evening, man.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's good to be here.
It's always great to have you on the show. Yeah, you never know where the conversation is going to go, and that's what I appreciate is open dialogue. And I was listening to you today on your program, and one of the things I caught you saying, and I'm going to do this. You had Tim McMillan on, and you had taken the time to tell him thank you for your work. You're achieving success. You're writing for Vice and Popular Mechanics and whatever. But you took the time to do that. And I don't stop and smell the roses with my guests as often as I do, as I should. So I do. This community does need to stop and thank you. You've been doing this for over 20 years. You started at the age of 15. And the success of the Black Vault and its importance to this community and to the world cannot be measured. And I'm taking a very serious moment here to say thank you for that. And don't ever give up. And how many documents do you still need to scan?
I got to tell you, thank you for that. I really do appreciate those kind words. In regards to the number, not quite 6 million yet, but I do have about 2.2 million pages online, which you're speaking with the entire staff to the Black Vault, so I'm proud of that number. It has now been a very long time since I started. 23 years in August I hit, so it's been a long time. It's been a lot of fun, but a long time. A lot of hard work, but going back to what you said, I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to ask you a dumb question. How many scanners have you gone through? And I'm being serious. It's a dumb question, but there's back in the day, right, where you are single page feeding, flipping up the lid, taking one page off and putting in another page, and it's clunking through its stuff. That is crazy talk. Are you using do you have some crazy high speed sheet fed scan?
Yeah, and funny you should say that. It's about at the end of its life. This was one that I purchased. I've gone through quite a few to answer your question. I don't know how many. When I started the Black Vault when I was 15, I couldn't afford a scanner. And my parents really didn't know I was running a website. And very quick story, I originally designed a legend for typing in the documents by hand. And so what I would do was literally get the documents from the government and type them in and create an HTML, essentially a text mock-up, not to be too geeky here, but I would code it in. And when documents were blacked out, I would develop a code for that. So I would have, characters, they call them ASCII characters to depict what was blacked out. If I couldn't read something, I had characters to depict that. That's how I started. And I would say about 500 pages in or so, I forget the exact number, but I had enough. Like, that's just ridiculous. And I had a flatbed scanner donated to me from somebody who was online. They were following what I was doing on the Black Vault. This was back in 1996, 97.
Right.
The internet was a much different beast back then. And they donated this flatbed scanner. And like you said, such a clunky technology. It was before PDFs were really popular, especially online, because websites just couldn't handle the bandwidth. And I would scan them in one page at a time. That's a nutshell version. I mean, it goes on for a couple of years before I finally was able to get a sheet feeder scanner. And then a couple of years ago, bought a fairly high speed one to do the job. But I think that sadly, I'm always trying to hit the top of the pages so the scanner catches the pages, because it has scanned so much. The wheel that catches the paper has worn out, and so it doesn't catch the paper anymore. But I will tell you this in closing, it is a much higher number compared to the number of scanners that I have. It is a much higher number to count the paper cuts that I have had in 23 years doing this. Honestly, I think I've lost pints of blood over the years.
And how much is left to be scanned?
I have piles. I posted a picture a month or two ago.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and there's piles. I mean, I would safely say thousands of pages that are here ready to be scanned. That's not counting the number of FOIA requests that I have open, which could yield tens of thousands. I mean, it's always kind of a crapshoot on what you're going to get. Sometimes you're denied in full. Sometimes you get 3 pages. Other times they'd say it's 3,000, 5,000, 2,000, 20,000, whatever the number is, pages that are coming my way. So it's a huge growing number of pages, but on top of that, just a pretty big task to put it all together.
Yeah, because then there's the other part of it. It's not just about the scanning. First off, you have to know what the document is that you're scanning. There's a story behind that and the logistics behind that. But after the scanning, all of this has to be organized. It still has to get brought into your web database. All of that filing's got to be correct, and it's got to work, and your file system has to work, and it just doesn't end with the scan. Like, for instance, Stanton Friedman's archives, I know that you've talked to Grant about that, and so have I, where they've got a team of people organizing that, and they're guessing 3 to 5 years to get it scanned.
That's the biggest challenge to archiving anything, but archiving government documents. That's the biggest challenge. And I wish that I got to see Stanton's collection at his home. I've been was friends with Stanton for a very long time, to the tune of about 20 years. Mm-hmm. Sadly, never got to see his home. And my friend Chris Rutkowski, who's a great researcher in his own right, had sent me a picture when he had visited Stanton Friedman of being in his bunker and just mounds of paper. And it was incredible to see, because Stan was such an amazing, smart, intelligent individual. And then you see these mounds of paper and you're like, holy heck, how'd you find anything? And yet he probably knew exactly where everything was. But yeah, that is the biggest challenge when you get all of this information and collect all of these documents, to make it make sense to the general public and to make it organized. And that's been hard. I won't lie. I mean, to deal with so many different topics, UFOs obviously is the most important and the most popular, and that's what I'm pretty much known for. But I go after secrets on anything and everything, and the Black Vault really does encompass all of that research. So again, to try and put it all into one central database, it's very challenging. A lot of fun, but a big challenge.
Now, on top of the Black Vault, you've been a television producer for many, many years. You're researching, you're doing your journalistic stuff. Now you've got a radio program that you're doing too as well, Black Vault Radio. You've got a lot of things that are in addition to FOIA requests and the amount of time and investment it takes to stay on top of a request that you've sent out. You have to do all the follow-up on that too as well to continue the Black Vault's actual mission, which is FOIA documents and its database. So now you are a researcher, you're a journalist, and that's what you are here tonight to discuss. How do you find the time to juggle all of this? And you're a dad. I mean, how do you pull this off?
Yeah, it's challenging. I won't lie. A couple years ago, I had started a business which is away from the Black Vault, unrelated to UFOs and government secrets, but created a business to kind of selfishly be able to try and do stuff like the Black Vault as a hobby and have the business work and support the bills. But I didn't know I'd do it full time. And lo and behold, I was able to do it. And so I'm in a very lucky position where the business that I run allows me to do some things with the Black Vault. That is starting to diminish as the business grows. But that was kind of a selfish thing to pursue, but it was one that worked out for me, which is why I'm able to kind of do the Black Vault as a fun hobby. I love it. The radio, I love it. The live streaming, I love it. Talking to you, I absolutely love it. So it allows me to do that. And selfishly, I built the business that way to create, again, that income that I sorely needed, because television, although is great, is very tough in this economy, this day and age, even with, a booming stock market. When the economy was really bad, what you were doing with 5 to 10 people 7-8 years ago, they expect you to do it with one now. And that's not an exaggeration. And it was just so burdensome to produce these big shows for like History Channel and Discovery Channel on very small budgets. And so that's why I kind of moved away a little bit from that. I still consult a lot, still do on camera stuff, but moved away from it. So that kind of afforded me a little bit of time to have fun. I still obviously run the business every day, but allows me to kind of sneak away periodically and do the Black Vault stuff, the stuff that really goes to the heart of what I love most.
Like reaching out to the Pentagon, which it seems like you now have I think you have a hotline. And you are able to find the time to do this type of research and journalism because that is another tireless effort. And your article, which I just posted about a week ago, when I read the article, I thought to myself, well, it was the headline that grabbed me, and the way that you said, the way that you presented it, here we go, here comes the curveball. All right, and I thought, now, for John to say that, something is this is before I read it, right?
Yeah.
Here we go, right? Well, I'm going to jump ahead before we go, then we're going to come back to this. But the article itself is about the Pentagon claiming that they want to correct the record and that they now need to state that AATIP was not a UFO or UAP program. This is very interesting. We're going to get into all of this, but I want to get before this. Were you reaching out to the Pentagon about this, or was this another accidental road bump that you happened to drive over?
It was a bit of an accidental road bump. The quick explanation is when I received the statements from the U.S. Navy that those videos that have been circulating were UAPs, that was a huge turning point that obviously made international headlines. And I had immediately started researching other aspects because that opens up. This is the importance of official statements that I think sometimes the general public misses, is that the minute something goes on the record and is backed by the U.S. military or the U.S. government, you can use that in FOIA requests and future requests. Now, as you just stated, sometimes they do change it. This is true with not only UFOs, but other topics as well. And that does happen. It's rare, but it happens, and it happened in this case. What I was pursuing was what exactly was AATIP and OSAP. Now, quite a few months ago now, the New York Post broke a story that they got Pentagon statements that said AATIP did investigate unidentified aerial phenomena / UFOs. And that's what I was pursuing and have been pursuing for a couple months now. That when that story broke in the New York Post, I was contacted by the journalist, Stephen Greenstreet, who deserves props for breaking that story. And the New York Post had asked me for some quotes, and then I eventually did a video live stream with them as well that was posted. And I used one word that I very rarely use, and that is shocked. And I told the New York Post something that I'll repeat now, that I was shocked that the Pentagon said that AATIP dealt with UAPs, because I simply was shocked. And it was like there was no evidence to support that of the very little publicly available information that we can get. We had the word of Luis Elizondo, who claims that he led the program, which I'm sure we'll get into. But we had his word, and then we have Senator Harry Reid's word. But other than that, there's kind of no evidence to support it. And the official word was always skirting around the UFO issue. So when I said shocked, I meant it. Now, fast forward months, I was pursuing one question. They established that it dealt with UAPs or UFOs. My question was, is that the scope of the program? Or was it an element of the program? Were they looking into, let's say, advanced pieces of technology being flown by Iran or China or North Korea or Russia or even their own military branches in America, and then in the process stumbled on videos that were being captured of UFOs, because that's a very believable scenario? Or was the program 100% dedicated to UFOs? And so that's the question that I was pursuing. I wasn't saying, hey, look, guys, you want to change your statement because I'm here to break that story for you. Right. You know, that wasn't even a thought in my mind. And that was the question, one of the questions. There were actually 11 total. And we can get into that, too, if you want. But that was one of 11 things that I was pursuing throughout four different branches of the United States military and departments within the U.S. government. And so those 11 points that I was pursuing funneled all into one desk of the Pentagon as they have changed their process of handling these requests. And the answer to that question that I was pursuing threw that curveball. And it was, yeah, we said this in the past, but we're going to change it. And that, to me, using the word shocked again, I didn't expect that, because I was expecting this was not a UFO program per se, but we did investigate UFOs as they came up in the course of, XYZ. But that's not what they said. They just said that they did not deal with the program or with the phenomena at all. And so that's their current stance. So it was an accident, absolutely 100% an accident. I was not thinking that they were going to give me that.
I want to read this quote from Susan Galde, which it was through an email to you, but I'm gonna read this passage, and it's, quote, "Neither AATIP nor OSAP were UAP related. The purpose of AATIP was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapons system applications with future technology projections over the next 40 years and to create a center of expertise on advanced aerospace technologies," end quote. That statement, when I read the article, forced me, and I told you about this earlier today, I am not going to say who sent me the document on the air, everybody, so you can forget about that. But it forced me to scratch my head because I had forgotten about it. I was sent the AATIP 38-page document, 38 report document. It's a couple hundred pages. I was sent that in October of 2017, before the launch of TTSA, before AATIP was a word. AATIP didn't pop out into the public until December 16th of 2017. That report, which I read fully, I dismissed. I thought it was science fiction. I thought it was fantasy. I recognized the names of the people that were involved in writing, or some of them, in writing up these reports, but they had nothing to do with UFOs, had nothing to do with alien or ET technology. And it just seemed to me that forward thinkers were putting their thoughts down into words about possibilities. That's what I thought of the report. And I dismissed it. I still have it on my hard drive now. And I went back and I looked at my email and I looked at the dates and I went, oh, man, the reason why I forgot about it was because I thought it was a nothing burger. And when I'm reading what the Pentagon is saying today, and I'm looking here, future technology projections over the next 40 years. That's exactly what that report is. It has nothing, AATIP had nothing to do with UFOs. I didn't know I was holding AATIP in my hands at that time. I just thought it was fun reading. It was fantasy. And I had told Richard Dolan that 2 years ago when I sent him a copy of it. So that's I think the Pentagon is spot on the money in what they are saying here. But the question is, what do we do with this now? Do we believe the Pentagon today? Do we believe the Pentagon last week? Are they allowed to change their minds? And how do we have our cake and eat it too here? Because there are those out there that say, believe the Pentagon when they say UAPs with the U.S. Navy, right, in the videos, but don't believe them when they change their mind, right? And you can't have it both ways. What are we supposed to do with this?
Yeah. Well, a couple things to unroll there. I mean, first and foremost, the 38 reports, the list has been officially released to coincide with whatever was sent to you as well, that the list of the 38 titles appeared first reported from a leaked document, And then it was officially released, I don't know what the time frame was, but quite a few months later, officially by the Defense Intelligence Agency. And this was listed in a letter to Senator John McCain back in January of 2018 that listed for Senator McCain the 38 reports created under AATIP. And as you already noted, yes, they all are kind of absent from any UFO or UAP reference. Around the same time frame, the AATIP, you had mentioned in the quote AATIP, essentially what that is a program name for the contract that was farmed out to Bigelow Aerospace to create those 38 contracts. And what's available has been public, if you can believe it, since 2008. It has been on the internet, on a U.S. government server, when it posted for bids for this AATIP contract to create 38 reports talking about advanced weapons and forward projection into 40 years. What I had uncovered from the DIA that had never been released before was that there was only one single lone bidder on that contract, which happened to have been Bigelow Aerospace's subsidiary known as BASS. And that is what ultimately got the contract. And that is what is referenced as being the quote unquote AATIP contractor that spent $22 million. Now, to your question of what we do with this is what's tough. Do we believe the Pentagon now? Do we believe them then? What do we do? At the end of the day, every group, including the government, is run and operated by humans. So we're all going to make mistakes. Believe it or not, it's hard to believe. Just don't tell my wife. I make mistakes too. Mm-hmm. So we have to understand that mistakes are made. TTSA makes them. I make them. And again, the government makes them. So I don't think we could just automatically start blacklisting everything the government says, because if we do that, then we automatically have to blacklist everything TTSA says because of the blunders they have made and that they have been forced to correct in the past. And so that is not a fair approach, because they have admitted a mistake. They could have changed their entire stance on everything. The 3 videos that the Navy told me were UAPs, they could have changed that, and they did not. They could have changed, though, hey, we're taking UAP reports seriously now. We have guidelines to do so. They could have changed that, and they did not. They could have changed Mr. Luis Elizondo had no responsibilities on AATIP, yet they did not. And so all of those statements all have stood. They aren't changing them. What they're saying is the AATIP program and AATIP contract / program did not deal with UAPs. And so it's a really interesting development. I don't know what to think. But going back to your point, no evidence officially anyway exists that said, oh, yeah, this is by far a UFO program. If the DIA told John McCain, here are the 38 reports, everything that was created under this contract, because Senator McCain, just to give a very quick preface, asked about the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and everything that was created under it. They called it all products produced under the AATIP contract for DIA to publish. And that, in turn, created a list of 38 reports, not a single one on UFOs or UAP. Now, in fairness, there are advanced propulsion technologies, very advanced science, like you said, very much borderline science fiction. We can argue if it's a waste of money or not, but very advanced pieces of technology and very advanced fields of science, but none of which are UAP or UFO. So that goes back to what I told the New York Post. I was shocked when they said it was UFO or UAP related. But at the end of the day, right now, there is no evidence that supports this was a UFO or UAP program at all. I just don't see it. And we may see it tomorrow. Maybe there's a FOIA release that I'll get or someone else will get. Right. Who knows? Maybe that'll be produced. But at this point, it's just not there. And so, yeah, we have to entertain the possibility that the Pentagon is telling the truth.
This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, John Greenewald of the Black Vault. More with John right after this short break. Stay with us. welcome back. Fade to Black, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, John Greenewald is here, the Black Vault. He released an article last Friday. And yes, once again, it's about the Pentagon and AATIP and ASAP. And, also, by the way, John, the cough button. See, my cough button here, when I hit it, the audience cannot hear me do what I need to do privately. You can in the talkback, in the headphones. So anything that I do crazy isn't going out over the air.
Oh, but I can hear it. Yeah, no problem. That happens to me too, sadly. Yeah. When I do an interview and I always got to tell the guest, not a problem.
I was just thinking about that because I'm coughing or doing whatever here, and I'm thinking, John can hear that. I hope he doesn't think that's going out over the air. Okay, so because I was just doing some pretty gross things here in the studio.
No worries.
Okay, Susan Gao, again, this is in your article. She continued, I could do a quote here, but she continues to say that Luis Elizondo, and I'm quoting directly, was not the director of AATIP, and I'm still continuing the quote here, and had no assigned responsibilities within the program. Now, let's unpack this a little bit. What does this really say?
Well, it definitely coincides with statements that they've given in the past that have been very confusing, and one that I would have hoped that would have been addressed by now. And I really thought they would have been by either TTSA as a public benefit corporation as a whole, or Mr. Luis Elizondo himself saying this is why it's wrong. And I have yet to see that. And the Pentagon's stance is that he had no responsibilities within the AATIP program. Now, that has been obviously a very controversial thing that has floated around now for quite a few months. The Intercept was the one, credit to them for breaking the story, authored by Keith Clore, who got the statement from the Pentagon, that said, again, Luis Elizondo essentially what they're essentially saying is he didn't work on the program, without saying that. They're saying no assigned responsibilities. Now, that paves the way that Mr. Elizondo maybe on his either free time, because he was curious, on his lunch hour, or during his workday, or whatever, worked on something on his own, and that's fine. But his story is that he was the director. So I only go by what people say publicly, and that's what he is saying. And the Pentagon is saying no. Now, will they change that statement in the future because they changed this other one? Well, that's a huge possibility. But until then, we have to, deal with the fact that that is what they are saying. And Mr. Elizondo has not addressed this at all, with the exception of one interview that I've heard by Martin Willis. And he asked him, this was shortly after the story broke in The Intercept, essentially about it. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Mr. Elizondo essentially said, well, everybody's entitled to his or her own opinion. Now, that's not a way to address what could be essentially a character assassination. They're questioning the guy's honesty and integrity, meaning the Pentagon is questioning Mr. Elizondo's public story. I would turn around and fight that, to be honest with you. I mean, if that was me. And so for months, I did not update my site that I've tried to stay very up to date on with that Pentagon statement. I wrote about it in other articles, but in the main articles on AATIP and ASAP and that research, I refrained from it because I really did expect Mr. Elizondo to deal with it or offer some kind of proof. And so even though, again, I had published articles, admittedly, I definitely referenced it because it's very important. My main research page, which is getting very lengthy on all the research I've done throughout various military branches on AATIP through FOIA, had refrained from mentioning it. But this is going back, I think, to June 1st of this year. And here we are at the end of the year, and there's still really no rebuttal.
I need to,
and I don't get it.
Yeah, and I feel like I just interrupted you, but
that's okay.
I want a clear understanding here for the audience.
Sure.
AATIP was nothing more than those 38 reports. With all of your research and documents and what you have learned, has AATIP extended beyond that boundary of the 38 reports that were written up?
Well, be prepared to be confused, because I'm confused and I love this stuff. This is where much of the confusion is on what is the relation between AATIP and OSAP and what did it do. I'll tell you quickly the three different stories that are being put out there.
Okay.
Mr. Elizondo says AATIP was not OSAP. It was a different program, and it was essentially spawned from the OSAP program. That's story one. Story two comes from Dr. Hal Puthoff, which happens to be a co-founder of TTSA and an undisputed member of the essentially the OSAP contract working for Bigelow, who helped author these 38 reports. According to him, AATIP was not a program at all. It was just a nickname, and it was actually OSAP that was the program. That's story number two. Story number three just came from the Pentagon, one that, again, very much surprised me because I would have bet money about the about this hierarchy being reversed. But according to the Pentagon, OSAP was just the contract that was given to Bass. AATIP was the overall project that OSAP was under. All three of those stories contradict each other. No two can be right. So who do you believe? And that therein lies one of many conundrums that is plaguing this story, that it just doesn't make sense. Now, to your question, did it go beyond those 38 reports? The only official evidence that we have right now is that letter that the DIA had written to John McCain, and that outlined the 38 reports. This is what's interesting, is that John McCain asked about the AATIP contract reports. The DIA sent him the 38 reports. You would assume those were under AATIP. However, the ones that have leaked out, the select few of those 38, if you look on the cover pages, they all reference OSAP. So the question is, John McCain asked about AATIP, and DIA said, here you go, and all the reports that have leaked out thus far say OSAP. Now, what does that mean? Are they the same program, different, or is that all AATIP was, which is what's called essentially a paper program? So they invest $22 million, and then they farm out to a government contractor this contract, and they say, okay, we want you to research advanced weapon systems and so on. And so that government contractor meets the requirements set forth in that contract. The contract itself has not been presented, either leaked or officially, but that's essentially how it works. So all the evidence shows at this point is that AATIP as a whole, being the umbrella project, pretty much generated the 38 reports under the OSAP contract that was given to Bass.
I remember you and I discussing this exact subject almost 2 years ago. Now, remember, we're December 11th, 2019 now. Okay, so it was sometime early last year. You and I were going, is OSAP, because now, we had the report and we were looking at it and trying to figure this out. Was OSAP AATIP or is AATIP OSAP? What is OSAP? And we were trying to unpack it then. And here we are at December 2019, no closer to trying to figure this out. We've been chasing this for a while now. But this possibility number 3 from the Pentagon may answer the questions that you and I were throwing at each other almost 2 years ago. Do you lean towards choice number 3 now? Are you leaning in that direction? I don't know which way to go with this myself.
I don't either. And up until about a week ago, and I've said this on multiple occasions, anybody can, fact check me. I actually believed Mr. Luis Elizondo on it. I thought OSAP was the umbrella project and AATIP spawned out of that. I believed him. And Dr. Puthoff, who I have asked, and he has never returned that request for comment, Why is there that discrepancy between the two? And I wrongly thought one of them must be right, and I would have bet money in a card game that Mr. Luis Elizondo was right. Lo and behold, pursuing the answer to that question that you and I have kicked around now for 2 years is that which one was right. In pursuing that, the Pentagon says, oh, by the way, no, that's not true. And AATIP was the umbrella. OSAP was the contract that was farmed out to a government contractor. And so that again was another curveball that it was, just showed me no matter what you think and no matter how hard you research and no matter what you do to kind of think things out, you can very much be wrong all the time, given the Pentagon is right. So I don't know who to believe. I really don't. I honestly have zero clue. But the evidence shows that those 38 reports were it. And the reason why I say that, again, is the DIA, an intelligence community agency, communicating with a United States senator saying this is everything AATIP did. Now, are they lying to Senator McCain? Possibly. We'll entertain that possibility. But at this point, that's an official document. And for the DIA to lie to a U.S. senator like that, saying this is everything that program produced, that would be very newsworthy, and it would open up a lot of other cans of worms.
Well, in those 38 reports where there's clearly nothing to do about UFOs or UAPs or phenomena or researching videos or crash saucers or anything like that, that is not what those 38 reports are about. And they were just reports. There was no investigating going on there. And so for Elizondo to be the director of a report think tank, right, which is what AATIP was, I don't get that. Maybe a project coordinator where you're assigning homework for everybody. Okay, let's go that far. But clearly there was nothing in those 38 reports about UFOs. But Elizondo himself said, and I'm quoting here, I need your response, AATIP itself spent its entire time on UFOs. End quote. Now, obviously, that is not the case. There's nothing about UFOs in AATIP in those reports. And then he continues, he says, in 2019, at the Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena AAP conference, he said, AATIP was a 100% UFO program, period. It was not looking at airplanes, end quote. I don't know what to do with this, John. It's clearly contradicting each other. Either you take the reports in AATIP as for what it is, and you listen to the Pentagon, or you listen to one guy, Elizondo, saying the exact opposite. And I just don't know what to do with it.
I'll be honest with you, neither do I. The right answer is for Mr. Luis Elizondo to address it, plain and simple. Whether to me, whether to you, whether to the New York Times, whether to Vice News, whether to Popular Mechanic, it doesn't matter. But to sit down and address the discrepancy. And if the Pentagon is truly doing a character assassination, I'm going to be blatantly honest with you. I am a taxpayer that pays way too much taxes every year, right? And if my government that I'm paying all those taxes to is willing to trash a DOD employee, I come from a military family, I want to know that, and I want to profile it. And I want to make sure his name is cleared, meaning Mr. Elizondo. Mm-hmm. And so the right answer is for Mr. Elizondo to say, look, this is the reality of it. The Pentagon is lying, or whatever PC way he wants to say it, or eloquent way to say it, but he needs to go on the record. Ignoring this only leads to speculation and trying to put together the pieces. And the only pieces that are being offered right now is from the Pentagon. They're speaking through FOIA. They're slowly, might I add, but speaking through the Pentagon PR office. And when mistakes are made, or a mistake, I should say, they have corrected it. Now, TTSA was praised by some of their biggest fans. They were praised for correcting their mistakes that they've made in the past, and we can get into exactly what those mistakes are if you want. But they've issued apology, at least one apology that I know of, for a blunder that they made, and of course they are praised for it. But when the Pentagon makes a mistake, that same crowd that praised TTSA will now dismiss everything that the Pentagon is stating in now up until the future, and everything that they've stated in the past. They just blanket say they're a bunch of big liars, and that's it. And so it's a very hard position for a researcher or an investigator to be in, because I'm trying to get the answers, but only one side is speaking to me. And if Mr. Elizondo would maybe address some of this, again, to whomever he chooses, we could potentially clear some of this up. Sadly, though, he chooses to ignore my requests, and I don't know what other requests he may get on a same or similar topic that he ignores. I can only speak for what I've sent to him, but he has ignored that, and that's problematic. If it's a public benefit corporation that wants to inform the public about what's going on, he should have no concerns about informing the public about what's going on. And if his former employer wants to trash him and he has proof to the contrary, I would hope that he shows it. And I've offered for more than quite a few months now since the story broke that I would be first in line to tweet out, write about, blast on my site, and support the evidence that he could bring out to contradict the Pentagon, because I know that they have been wrong in the past. And yet that has yet to happen. So I'm sitting tight. I really don't know what to believe, but I will say the silence creates a very big problem when it comes to that pursuit of the truth.
If and I stated this publicly last week, and I said very clearly that if the Pentagon was attacking me or my wife or my family in this fashion, I would stop at nothing to get things straight.
Yeah.
I wouldn't sit on my hands and ignore this, hoping it's going to just go away.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong approach. Why? Look, if you want it to go away because apparently there's issues with it, if it was true what the Pentagon was saying about me, and or how do I say this? That it was untrue about my position being truth. I'm going to stand up for what is right, and I'm not going to have my name or my family dragged through this in such a way unless there's issues and you don't want to confront it head on because you can't. That would be the only thing stopping me from doing it, because I would, oh man.
Yeah, it would make you mad. And that allegiance, which I respect Mr. Elizondo for, who's spoken about his patriotism. And like I said, I come from a military family, and I understand that, respect it, and praise that in his own right. When the government, if this is a character assassination, is trashing him, that allegiance should go only out the window with that issue, and he should start giving that evidence and bringing it forward and saying, you know what, I am talking about unclassified issues. This is who I am, and here is proof. I'll give you a very quick example of something that I feel he can do, meaning Mr. Elizondo, but has chosen not to, and I don't know why. Recently, I interviewed a man who was a former employee of Bigelow Aerospace, of Bass, and his name is Chris Marks. And Chris has come forward with a story where he has concerns that during his tenure as a employee of Bass, he feels like maybe there was experimentation going on against his wishes and against his knowledge. And he believes that quite possibly it was OSAP money that funded that research that was, again, against him, testing against a human being. And so he has concerns about that. He's not making allegations, but rather posing some very interesting questions. I heard this, was very intrigued by it, because part of his story
Oh, we lost you, John. We just lost John's yep, sure enough. That is some government interference for you. Wow. Okay. And I'm looking at the clock. I could go to a break right here. This is great. You like that? Right at the moment And I don't freak out anymore. I enjoy this. That is, did you hear the beep? Yep, I don't know, John. Yeah, he's let's try this again. And I'm gonna man, I'm all good here. Let's see if
yeah, can you hear me?
That was some NSA. That was some DOD running interference, man. That was
it just died on my end. But where did I get cut off? I don't know where I.
The revelations coming from Chris.
Yeah, so he's bringing forward these questions and concerns, and so I wasn't going to bring him onto my show without asking for proof of who he says he is. And so I asked him. I said, "Can you prove Bigelow Aerospace employment? Can you prove your background as a military personnel, a military officer? Can you prove some of the stuff that he was claiming to me privately?" Because he and I had spoken for hours before we ever did the show. And within the day that I asked, he had ample evidence to show the history of what he was claiming, where he was claiming it, with photographs, with pay stubs from Bigelow Aerospace, with checks that were not even blurred out. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but meaning I saw the whole thing. It's not like he, blurred out 90% of the check and it's like his name and you have no idea, where it came from.
Right.
He sent everything. And my whole point of bringing this up, because I do give him kudos for that, is that if somebody has questions about who you are, you should be able to kind of essentially prove it. And that's what I would hope that Mr. Elizondo will one day do with someone that says, you know what, I did work on AATIP and here's proof. Here's an unclassified report that I created. Here's an unclassified message that I sent with my signature line that says, director of AATIP or whatever. There's got to be something. In the DOD and the Pentagon, you don't just work on things secretly and no one knows. Of course there's black budget programs. Of course, there's secrecy going on. Of course. But for only one man to be operating within the Pentagon that only he can prove, I just don't buy it. So I'm hoping that evidence produces itself like, again, Chris was able to produce to me when somebody asks or questions your work history. And to date, that has yet to happen.
I have, and so do you, and anybody else. I have a paper trail of everywhere that I've ever worked, going back decades. I would have to go through boxes in my garage, but I got lots of stuff, right? I just got stuff. I got business cards. I got whatever. I got company party pictures. I've got email, letter, reports, things done, pay stub, taxes, everything. I've got all of it to back everything if I had to, only because we all have our stuff. We have it, so one piece of paper and then we could just move on. I had made I got to take a break right here, but I made this comment last week. And I really stand behind this, which is I feel that the impact of TTSA is fading, and it's on the down. It's fading. Certainly compared to where it was 2 years ago. My interest is fading with it. It's just like it's almost like they're a canceled check. It's almost at that point where I'm not concerned about it anymore. And your article only solidifies my loss of interest, right? That this just may be nothing, and that the entire community got stirred up and their emotions, and everybody was so happy. And here we are 2 years later. Let's take a break right here, John. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, John Greenewald of the Black Vault. We got lots more to talk about tonight, and we're going to get to all of it when we come back. One of them that we're going to talk about the FAA. We're not quite done with the Air Force, though, or the Army, or the Navy, the Marines. And we're going to talk some Twitter, too. We'll be right back after this. Stay with us. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Tonight, John Greenewald is with us of the Black Vault. Tomorrow night's Fader Night. Open lines all night long. It's my favorite night of the week, besides when John Greenewald is on with us. John, check this out. We have a strange situation that we all need to just get out there and understand. Because when the Pentagon or the military says the Navy, UAPs, right? That's what's in these videos. The videos are UAPs. Suddenly, everybody's happy. And I'm glad that the media grabbed the story. I remember you and I being on Coast to Coast that night, breaking this from the weekend, and then Monday, right? Oh, yeah. Man, that was a pretty fun ride. But when the Pentagon says what the flag wavers don't want to hear, then they say the Pentagon is lying. And we have a it's like we're walking paradoxes in the UFO community, right? It's just like, it's the strangest thing. It changes the definition of paradox. And now I have to ask, what is the rest of the military doing with the UAP subject? That's the Navy came out and dropped the UAP bomb. What about the Air Force, the Marines, or the Army? Do they have any procedures for reporting UAPs?
Yeah, I haven't published this yet, but I'll talk about it with you. I did get another statement from the Pentagon that is, nothing earth-shattering yet, but it focuses in on the Air Force. Because what you just asked is a very natural next question to, hey, wait a minute, if the Navy is taking this seriously, what about the branch of the military that primarily flies in the sky? What are they doing? And the U.S. Air Force has been eerily silent about the whole thing with the U.S. Navy. Now, I've tried to pursue statements now for months since those Navy statements came in with the U.S. Air Force. Finally, last week, I did get a short statement that, number one, the Air Force does not have any UAP guidelines, procedures, manuals, or anything. So contrary to what the Navy is saying, that these UAP, whatever they are, that are creating a concern over the threat as they are doing these incursions on Navy installations, the Air Force is not saying the same thing. And that really boggles my mind a little bit, because it's like, well, a foreign intelligence here on Earth, or let's say a foreign intelligence maybe not so much on Earth, if they are spying on us or coming down and they're surveilling us, they're not going to lean over and whisper to each other, okay, only go to U.S. Navy facilities. Don't worry about any Air Force ones. So if the Navy is having the problem, why wouldn't the Air Force? Now, the Pentagon told me, and I'll quote it here, incursions reported by U.S. Air Force pilots most frequently involve unmanned aerial systems, UASs, being flown near flight lines. So they're essentially saying that any encounter with U.S. Air Force is primarily drones. That's kind of what they're falling back on. So it's a very highly contradictory way to approach the Air Force's problem than how the U.S. Navy approached their problem, which was whatever these are, they call them UAP. The Air Force says, yeah, they're primarily drones. And it's a really weird way for the Pentagon to really kind of approach this, that one branch of the military says, yes, it's a problem. We're investigating them. There are guidelines to do so, but they're heavily classified, so we're not going to give them to you. That is the U.S. Navy. The Air Force says we have no guidelines. We haven't cared to make any because all the encounters are essentially drones anyway. And so it's very, very weird. The next line, which I'll quote from that statement, which again I haven't published this yet because I am doing follow-ups to try and take the next step here. But, quote, the U.S. Navy investigates all reports of incursions reported by Navy pilots, and for those initially reported as unidentified aerial phenomena, seeks to identify them whenever possible. Some incursions are eventually identified as UASs. some as other aerospace craft, and others remain characterized as unidentified. So you can even see by this statement here that it's one single line about U.S. Air Force pilots and their encounters with drones. And then you have the next one that goes into more detail with the U.S. Navy that says, yeah, some are drones, some are aerospace craft, whatever those are, and there are some that they characterize as unidentified. So that to me really makes me scratch my head. It's like, wait a minute, what are you guys saying here? Like, why is there such a difference between the two military branches? And I don't have an answer to that yet, which is primarily why I haven't published that statement. But I am pursuing what happens when Air Force bases and installations do have incursions on them by an unknown craft of whatever kind. Because, the Air Force, if you fly a drone, if Jimmy Church gets a new drone and he runs over to Nellis Air Force Base and he flies it to go try and take some pictures in restricted airspace, they're not going to look at that and go, well, there's Jimmy flying his drone again. Okay, well, we don't have any manual, so there's nothing we can do. No, there's something that they're going to do. And so what I'm looking for is, what are the manuals and procedures for that? And that's the question right now.
Yeah, and what about the Marines and the Army? They have pilots too.
As of this point, they have not referenced and or addressed anything yet. I say yet because, quite possibly, I'm trying to pursue that too. But at this point, there's nothing to report because they haven't said anything yet.
Now, could there be, and I know that we were all excited, it hasn't really changed for me, but I do have to ask the question. When the Navy came out and said UAP concerning the videos and used those three letters, could it be that they had to use unidentified aerial phenomenon because it was covering up a black project or something else that they were working on, some type of weapons testing, and they couldn't say and can't say what it actually was, and the only safe coverage is to say, yeah, it's UAPs?
That's absolutely a logical question and way to view this, and that's a possibility. But then you essentially pave the way that the military now is creating a UFO phenomena for their own benefit. I'm not saying that's not the reality here.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Well, yeah, I would. I mean, if they are doing that, in my personal opinion, that creates more of an issue for them. If they, rather than saying, look, yes, we're aware of the 2004 Nimitz encounter, but it's classified and we're not going to go into it, or it's military technology, but it's currently improperly classified. That to me would be a safer way to get out of this. To create this whole narrative around UFOs or UAPs, look at what the mainstream media has done with it, and look at how the public has dealt with it. And the public is creating this outroar for more answers, which I support. I believe we need more answers. So don't take that the wrong way. But it's like that creates a lot more noise for them to do that than it would be for them to just say, look, there are classified pieces of technology that we often test in and around our, military units. The information is properly classified, or something to that effect. What are you going to do at that point? You essentially just kind of give up. Like, what can you do with that? It's truthful. They're not lying. And it's classified. So it shuts down any further inquiries.
Right.
But their narrative saying UFOs or UAPs just paves the way for a heck of a lot more headache.
We've got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, but I want to wrap up a couple of thoughts here, and which is this. Nimitz and Roosevelt, East Coast, West Coast, 11 years apart. Do you feel, this is a yes or no question, do you feel that the phenomena that occurred at both locations, although it was 11 years apart, were the same phenomena?
No.
Okay. Based on that, those were two naval exercises off of the coast of the United States. Very similar environments. right? Naval exercises, 2 aircraft carrier groups. It's the Navy. The encounters didn't happen in wartime. It didn't happen over land. It didn't happen over Kansas City during exercises. It happened during naval exercises with 2 carrier battle groups off of the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. Why isn't that simple question? It's too much coincidence going on here, right? It wasn't an encounter with the Air Force in Germany at Ramstein. Right?
Yeah.
We're talking about 2 very strangely similar environments. And why isn't that question being put out there more and being addressed directly?
Well, I would argue that it is actually being put out there. The problem is actually getting answers. I'll only speak for myself here. I did pursue one of my 11 points that I referenced. I did ask specifically, let's get away from the UAP thing for a second, and focused in that if the Air Force was testing classified technology, utilizing it against the most powerful Navy in the world, but essentially seeing how pilots could track it, how pilots would react to it, what were its capabilities. That, to me, is a very logical way to look at it. Mm-hmm. However, the Pentagon stated, paraphrasing here, but stated that they do not do that without the Navy's knowledge. And in addition, they also told me that during the process of the Navy investigations, they do coordinate with other military branches to cross-reference whether or not whatever the UAP was, could it have been, let's say, Air Force technology. So what they're saying is during the course of the investigation, they do reach out to the Air Force. I am pursuing that, which again is why you haven't seen some of those quotes yet, because there's still some open-ended question marks. So it is being pursued. But I can tell you that the article that you did read, published just days ago, that you did quote from, that took since at least September 1st, since I was sending those questions out. And so from September 1st to pretty much within 24 hours of my publish, that here in almost mid-December, that is how long it takes. And so the military is not quick to address any of this stuff, especially when you're possibly encroaching on a classified area. But I did find it very interesting because that was an out for the military. They could have said, yes, we absolutely test within the vicinity of naval exercises. Sure. And they didn't do that. And so they essentially said that they would not do that. Now, that doesn't mean that that's gospel and they possibly wouldn't test classified technology. But again, that's the official word.
The road that we have been on, and it's been a fun ride for a couple of years and trying to figure all of this out. I'm not sure where we are today, but I get the feeling that we may have seen all that we're going to see out of the Pentagon. As far as videos go, cooperation, or the conversation about UFOs, everything that could have happened has already happened. Do you think that we're at the end of that cooperation, probably because this was all handled wrong?
Jimmy, challenge accepted. I will fight for more information, videos, photographs, documents, manuals, procedures, guidelines. I'll keep fighting for it. Do I think it's the end? Well, I never want to say that, because I'm always pleasantly surprised that additional information will come out. One thing that I want to make sure I bring up that goes to this question but expands a little bit more is the potential that this is all a lie by the United States government and the Pentagon to switch their stance about AATIP. And this is another element that we haven't discussed yet, really, which is the Freedom of Information Act, which, yes, sometimes the public will argue, that doesn't work. Well, I've got 2.2 million pages of reasons why I can show you it does work. And OSAP was an unclassified program. So you're dealing with something that's not like NSA's PRISM and talking about spying on communications from the general public and some very highly classified settings. Right. We're dealing with unclassified levels. And so the Freedom of Information Act opens up a whole new avenue for documentation and information. Now, why do I bring this up? Because if the Pentagon is lying, the Freedom of Information Act will eventually catch up to releasing information. And if the Pentagon is lying and incorporating some kind of cover-up technique here, what they have to achieve is not only getting the Pentagon to stay on board with their message, but they have to funnel through to the years of FOIA officers to come, that if anybody ever talks or requests information about AATIP or OSAP, you have to destroy and make disappear any evidence that would contradict the Pentagon statement. It's an undertaking that's very difficult to do. Even going back to 1947, which I feel is a provable cover-up of some kind of the Roswell incident,
right.
Even then, when the Freedom of Information Act didn't exist, it was very hard for them to do. That was before the electronic age. That was before the FOIA. That was before all this stuff, and yet they were unable to cover it up. Now, when you add all these other elements in the 21st century, it's near impossible. So if this is some kind of lie and cover-up, that evidence will be released in the weeks, the months, or maybe even the years to come. But I think it will come out. And in that respect, I would say this is not the end. Maybe the Pentagon will say, you know what, we're not doing any official statements anymore, but the documents come from a different office. And so that's why I would argue this is definitely not the end. And I will continue to seek out that information. And if that information clears the name of Luis Elizondo, I will be quick to post it. I have no problems with that. I wish he would communicate a little bit more with the general public and some of those questions to help address what the Pentagon is saying. But until then, the next step is to wait for some of these FOIAs to be processed and see what they yield.
Yeah, I look forward to that day because I've wasted way too much time on something that isn't real.
Yeah,
I've wasted, and so come clean so we can just stop talking about it so we can officially just forget about this whole thing and move on. The other part of the Pentagon statement that we didn't address tonight yet, which is OSAP and AATIP. One program over on the side, writing reports, whatever, doing some research. Okay. And then there's, if we're going to put that to bed, what about the other side that says two separate programs? OSAP was interdimensional, paranormal, Skinwalker Ranch, portals to Stargate research. And that's what that was for. AATIP was dealing with Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah, now we're getting into a side of this that really has no evidence to support it. Not even Mr. Elizondo, as far as I am aware, is talking about, paranormal poltergeist type research on Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
But there are some bloggers out there that are trying to make that case that Skinwalker was the home for AATIP or OSAP, and Bass operated out of there, and that was it. And that's where, even though I have a lot of respect for Chris Marks posing the questions that he did on my program, I may respectfully disagree that OSAP money went to that. However, if it did, and Skinwalker played a role in this, and there was paranormal research and this, that, and the other thing, if that is true, which I'm open to, I absolutely am, you have to then consider this entire ordeal and the $22 million that was reported to go to Bigelow, if that is ultimately true. You have to entertain the idea that this was what we would call a sweetheart deal, because this was spearheaded by Senator Harry Reid, and he's the one that got the money, and it was awarded to one sole bidder, as I've already stated, which was Robert Bigelow. And if you look at publicly available documents, you will see that Robert Bigelow is a big donor to Harry Reid, or was a big donor, I should say, while Senator Harry Reid was a senator, a sitting senator. And so was this a sweetheart deal? So in my opinion, you can't have both to be true, because when you look at, again, the publicly available information, you don't need to look at leaked records. When you look at what OSAP was, it has nothing to do with not only UFOs or UAPs, but paranormal at all. And so if that money was given to Robert Bigelow, you have to wonder, well, why, like, what are the odds? Was this all coded language that they put out to the public? And maybe Lockheed could have got a UFO program in secret, or some other agency? No, in my opinion, not. I mean, if this was some kind of top secret program, they would have never posted it publicly. And this would have been very much behind the scenes. But the contrary is true. And it was something that is posted publicly, and that Bigelow was the only bidder. If you also look at Harry Reid's interviews, what's very interesting is Harry Reid himself told New York Magazine that he was talking to Robert Bigelow about essentially creating a program well before Senator Reid ever went to Senators Inouye and Stevens, which were the co-sponsors of the bill, both deceased now, so we can't ask them the details. But Harry Reid said himself that he was talking to Bigelow well before he ever got funding for this program. Now, again, what are the odds that he's pretty much coordinating with Robert Bigelow, according to his interview, coordinating with Robert Bigelow, then gets money for this program, and then Robert Bigelow is the only bidder? That to me, again, as a researcher, does not make sense, other than it was orchestrated that the money was always going to go to Robert Bigelow. If that is true, then we have to talk about that public solicitation for bids, which outlined a program for weapons research forward projecting into 40 years into the future that had nothing to do with the paranormal, UFOs, and UAPs. And if you, me, and everyone listening contributed to the $22 million of taxpayer money that went to a private corporation to do what he wanted, there's a lot of questions there that need to be answered. It's not an accusation, but if X, Y, and Z are true, then you got to entertain A, B, and C. And sadly, that is what this is turning out to be if it was a paranormal program. The bottom line, though, is Occam's razor. If there's no evidence to support that there were poltergeist research, cryptozoological research, whatever they want to say about portals and this, that, and the other thing about OSAP, Occam's razor says it probably wasn't about that, and quite possibly was something else entirely. If Bigelow really did fund it, probably didn't come with come from OSAP money. At least I hope it didn't.
No, it's a much simpler answer. It's definitely Occam's razor. I've got 90 seconds. Quick question. The talk has always been about military personnel being seen at Skinwalker, that there was a military influence there, whether it was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Rangers, SEALs, would have special forces. Are we at that point now, certainly after speaking with Chris Marks, that U.S. military personnel inside of the United States was on a privately owned ranch that was doing paranormal research? Are we at that point now? Are we in the fact side of this?
Well, I don't believe so, no. And very quickly, within your 90 seconds, for the United States military to operate on United States soil, there's a huge legality problem with this. And so in my personal opinion, those aspects of the story are embellished. What we do know from someone like Chris Marks, who in my opinion has more than enough evidence to show he was there, he worked there, whether or not it was OSAP money, who knows. They are former military. Chris has a great investigative background, highly trained. So it would absolutely make sense that he was hired to do investigative things for Bass. Again, arguably whether or not for OSAP, who knows. But again, his background really shows that. So former military, absolutely. But active military, the military with boots on the ground, operating a United States intelligence community operation on U.S. soil, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I'd like to see evidence, but I just don't buy it at all.
Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. John Greenewald is here. Man, what a great conversation, John. Stay right there. We've got so much more to talk about, and I'm going to get Bob Lazar into the show tonight. We'll be right back after this. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planets. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow John right there at BlackVaultCom on Twitter. And, John, let's change gears a little bit. Speaking about Freedom of Information Act documents, and I want to get to your other article that was just posted, too, about the FAA. But Bob Lazar, I said last week, and it kills me to make this statement, but I think I'm pulling the plug on Bob Lazar. And it's taken me many years to get to this point, but I'm not feeling as confident as I used to in the past. And that's where I'm at. And you're the depository of documents. Have you ever got any official documents out of the government with the name Bob Lazar in them?
Well, you won't like the one I did get from the government that had Bob Lazar's name. It was from the Intellipedia system. That's kind of the intelligence community's equivalent to Wikipedia. It's an internal system. There's actually 3 systems that incorporate it. And I actually found Bob Lazar referenced as pretty much being a hoaxer. They talk about his pseudoscience and pretty much making up the story about element 115. So although there was no meat to the information, they do reference him as being this essentially storyteller about element 115. What I have pursued, when you had said that before the break, I kind of went through my database here of FOIA requests. I do have an open request about United Nuclear, which is Bob Lazar's company. Now, as we know, it was quote unquote raided during the film of Jeremy Corbell. However, investigative journalist Tim McMillan chased the police records, the local police records where Bob Lazar's United Nuclear was located. And there was really nothing about, looking for element 115. It was essentially a raid that was conducted for being tied to a murder. And that this guy who, not Bob Lazar, but this guy who had murdered his wife used something called thallium and potentially had ordered it from Bob Lazar's company that sells kind of these exotic materials. And so they went in looking for records and receipts. So nothing supported the whole element 115 thing. But I heard that the FBI was there. And so even though Tim McMillan had gone after the local records and the state records, I went after the FBI records. That is still being processed. However, it doesn't look like anything is in the time frame of that raid. United Nuclear has been in trouble before with the law. So Bob Lazar has had quite a few different run-ins through United Nuclear. So I do have that being processed. One of the other things, though, you might find interesting, I have had this on my desk. I have it in my hand here. This just came to me about a week ago. This was not planned, by the way, if anybody thinks this was a coincidence.
No, I'm on the edge of my seat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
what is it?
Well, as we all know, Bob Lazar's book was just published here in the last month or so. And that's another interesting TTSA connection. It was published by a company that is TTSA's company or To the Stars' company. So Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, or To the Stars Media, I guess, is the one that published this book. But they tried to kind of hide it, in my opinion. They I don't know if they're embarrassed of publishing Bob Lazar's book. In my opinion, the Lazar story, albeit is interesting, in my opinion, is fiction. I don't believe that there's truth to it. And so I think To the Stars was essentially trying to shield that they published his book. It came out that they did. Well, in the book was a foreword by George Knapp. And there was an interesting little bit in there about Congressman Brian Philip Bilbray, I believe it is, that went to the FBI. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what's in the foreword, but essentially what it was saying was that Bilbray went to the FBI trying to verify Bob Lazar's history and employment. And the FBI essentially said, after researching it, looking into it, that Bilbray was not cleared, I guess, and that he was denied access to the information. And so the FBI pushed back and wouldn't answer his question. Well, what should be noted is that anytime a senator or a congressman communicates with an agency, a federal agency, there's a paper trail. There's actually congressional correspondence logs, which keeps track of everything. And yes, I've got tons of them, and it's really interesting to see those communications. So I filed a FOIA with the FBI looking for not anything about aliens or UFOs, but rather the communications that Bill Bray had with the FBI. And they came back after a wait that said that they had no records. There was nothing there. So I appealed it. I said, look, there's a book that's being published now. Here is exactly what it says. And I had I had it verbatim in the request, what the book said. And I got the FBI to reopen the request based on that information. They went back into their records, searched all the logs, searched all the information, and there was absolutely nothing. And they gave on December 3rd another no records request. So essentially, according to the FBI, there is zero evidence that Bill Bray ever contacted them. Now, of course, many will fire back and say that that's all a cover-up and they're erasing the history like they did Bob Lazar's identity. But sadly, it just coincides with the story as a whole, in my opinion, that when you really pursue the facts, the quote-unquote facts that are being presented to you when it comes to Bob Lazar, on the surface, they seem intriguing. But when you start actually researching it, you realize there's really nothing there to back it up. So I've sat on this letter for a couple of days. I don't really know what to do with it. I mean, it's nothing earth-shattering other than it's yet another piece of evidence to show that the Bob Lazar story is likely not true.
I didn't realize that Tim McMillan wrote that article because I read it twice. I'm sorry, Tim. I didn't look at the byline. But I read that article twice, and I had to go back and make sure that I was understanding exactly what was presenting there, because that is 180 degrees opposite of what was presented in Corbell's movie. And certainly conversations since then in public about the raid on Lazar's home.
Yeah.
It was about a murder.
Yeah.
And the local authorities, the detectives that were involved, and thallium, and who was selling thallium. And there was a couple of interesting things that were pointed out in Tim's article, which was that there are collectors out there of elements, right? They collect elements. People collect coins, right? People collect baseball cards. Some people collect elements, and some elements are very difficult to get your hands on, understandably so. And one of them is thallium. And apparently Bob got a collection, somebody's collection of elements, and in that collection of elements was some kind of protected, you don't want to get sick from it, of thallium. And he advertised that. I could have this wrong, but the point is a simple one, that the person involved in this murder purchased that collectible piece of thallium that Bob had somehow acquired. That's how the police got involved. And they wanted the records. They wanted to see if there was communication there, if there was a sales receipt, and they could tie this thallium back to this murder where this poisoning happened with thallium. My point is, Bob knew all of that. He knew why the raid was there. And that the questions were raised about thallium and the potential of a murder. And they're not there to investigate him for murder. They just want to know if he can provide them with this information and help with their investigation that's going on with his murder. That it had nothing to do with 115.
Yeah.
And that just caused me to back up and go, there's something just not quite right about this. I don't mind somebody marketing a movie, but to imply all of this, where you got a raid that's going on at the house, oh, great, so let's tie this into Element 115 and Area 51 in your story. It'll be great. Nobody will find out. Well, people do find things out, like Tim McMillan. And when that article was published, it was part of, like you just said, it was another piece of the puzzle where it forced me to just kind of back up and analyze this entire situation of what's going on here. I think that letter that you got about no materials found from the FBI, it's just another piece to the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, not to repeat myself, but that's what we need to do is we need to not be afraid of questioning what we are being told. And that goes into something we haven't talked about yet, but very quickly, the hypocrisy that's really out there, that people want to believe. And if you go against that, they will start changing their viewpoints in order to believe what they want to believe. And going back to that Pentagon thing, it's like when the Pentagon says something that people like, they eat it all up and they go, see, the Pentagon said it, so it has to be true. Those Navy videos, they are UAPs. I told you, Tom DeLonge rocks. Luis Elizondo is who he says he is. And that's it. Case closed because the Pentagon said it. TTSA even made this big graphic about how the U.S. Navy said it. So they, too, find value when the military and the government puts their name behind a statement. Mm-hmm. Yet, when they say something they don't like, all of a sudden it's this massive conspiracy. It's a cover-up. It's a smear campaign. They're trying to assassinate a character. It's that hypocrisy that shines, and I just don't get it, because we have to not be afraid of just pushing forward for answers and challenging what we are being told. And if we confirm it, all the more power to us as a field, as a community, whatever you want to say it. If it doesn't confirm it, we need to question it and address it. So Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, whomever should really kind of approach this and go, okay, well, maybe it wasn't about 115. Or if they think it's a massive cover up, then say it. TTSA has to address the Pentagon thing. If they think that what is potentially human error and that they accidentally said that AATIP was UAP related when it wasn't, well, let's put that on the record. Let TTSA say the Pentagon is lying, or let's say that there is a cover-up job, or whatever they want to say. That discussion needs to take place between all of these big players in these stories. And for me, as a researcher, investigator, when you look into them, we have to push back. Even if we believe it, push back and say, I'm going to challenge this. I'm going to go for the documents. I'm going to go for the records. I'm going to go for proof. And if you don't find it, then maybe we have that conversation. But when one side just remains silent, you need to question that too, because that silence is a piece of the evidence.
And here's the problem. This is the real problem. People out there, wonderful people, have had encounters, have seen something strange in the sky, something crazy, a black triangle, just something insane. I have seen the same things. I know that clearly there is a phenomenon in our skies that isn't from this earth. It's clearly defined as that, okay? Not mincing it. And those people out there, like myself, that have seen what we have seen and are questioning things, we also need the support and the honest efforts from others out there. We don't need to be let down by something that is out there for money, chasing fame, making things up, not being, because it's disappointing. And we've got too much emotionally invested in all of this. It doesn't change my narrative. It doesn't change what I've seen in the skies or any other witnesses out there, that have had real encounters and have seen things. And that's the problem. When I say that I'm pulling the plug on Lazar, that doesn't mean that I don't, that I haven't seen what I have seen.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't change, and it doesn't change for everybody else. But everybody needs that support. And when we're so close, right? We got the Pentagon, we got the DIA, they're behind us now. We're getting close to this. Finally, we can move forward. I'm not crazy. And then boom, all of this stuff happens. It's very disappointing, and I feel for this community. And I will always say this, John, it's community first. And it has to stay that way. It's the community first.
Well, it should be. But sadly, in 21st century, 2019 ufology, I feel it's not. And you had mentioned Twitter earlier. I mean, you if you want a dose of what this has become, check out some of the stuff that goes in on Twitter. And we should be able to have a conversation like you and I are now, and even off the air, where, sometimes we don't agree. But at the end of the day, I would sling a burger with you on a barbecue and we can cheers a beer together and we're friends, right?
Right.
That's the way a community should operate. But there has been in the last 2 years this vicious pushback by some, not all, but some of the supporters of this TTSA effort. I call them the super fans, that if you go against that and if you do challenge what Mr. Elizondo is saying or what Tom DeLonge is claiming or whatever, when you do challenge it, you are destroyed. Well, they attempt to destroy you. They come after you with everything that they got, and it gets vicious. Not facts. They stay away from those. Those are apparently poisonous. But they come after you on a personal level. And I mean, I've had people fabricate about me, lie about me, even threaten about me, or to me, I should say, about this topic. Why? Like, why is there this cultist mentality by some that you are with us or against us? There is no middle ground. You cannot ask questions. And when TTSA speaks, it is the gospel according to TTSA. And that is something that we have to get out of. And it doesn't have to be kumbaya community all around singing songs, but good God, let it go already with these attacks and so on and so forth. And what may come as a shock to some of those super fans that I reference is that ufology stretches far back, well before 2017 and well before 2004 when the Nimitz encounter happened. Ufology has an enormously interesting history that is now being ignored. And it's like ufology started in 2004 and then it hopped to October 2017 and that's it. And that's what these again super fans are all about. And I worry about, if you want to call it a community still, I hope that that's the truth. But I worry about the community if that is what this has become. And I worry about the future of UFO research simply on the fact that the discussion, the conversation, the debate that we should be having within ourselves, conversations like this, are not taking place anymore. And there's tweets and name calling and threatening and this, that, and the other thing. I won't name the name, but somebody told me that someone well connected to TTSA, you'd recognize his name, referenced me, and that I was that anybody who was speaking out against TTSA should essentially die. Now, really think about that for a second, that they should die. Like, how ludicrous is that to say? And yet that is the level that this is sinking to. And I worry. I really do, because we should not get to that level. We should have a conversation, or we should question, because that doesn't mean that you're fighting or making a denial. That means we're questioning. And sadly, some people are losing that.
Yeah. If you go into that zone of is staying outside of real research and you go into that kind of zone, I disconnect. Right, I'm just done. There's nothing important that individual could ever say ever again that I would deem credible or important. I just wouldn't care anymore. And yeah. The community sees that too as well, because you have to have decorum. If you're going to be a researcher, you're going to be a part of this community. If you're going to be a commenter, then you need to be professional and show respect. And once you get outside of that zone, your colors are shown. Yeah. And that's really the bottom line there. I don't know, John. I made a comment. I don't comment often, but I did on, I think it was a Grant Cameron thread a couple of weeks ago, and it was about TTSA. And my comment was this: look, we need to really think about how we are going to address TTSA 5 years from now. You need to stop and think about how we are going to look back and think about this whole situation. Because today, right now, we don't know much. We don't know much. We don't know what the objectives are. We don't know what the attitude is. We don't know what the reasons are. The whys, there's so many whys, questions, why? We don't have the answers to any of that. We don't. Are they a media company? Are they researching UFOs? Are they a CIA front company? Are they none of that? Is it something very serious? 5 years from now, are we going to look back and be thankful? Or 5 years from now, are we going to look back and go, do you remember that company TTSA? Right? But that's all in the future. Today, we don't know. And that's where we're at. There's no reason to fight. There isn't. We don't have anything. There isn't anything on the table, really, of substance to fight about.
Yeah. Well, I think that going to your point about we don't know what they're going to be, to be honest with you, don't think they know what they're going to be. 2 years ago, they, I don't mean it negatively, but were soliciting for investors based on the fact that they were seeking what they were seeking without essentially government oversight. Without the worrying about the priorities of the U.S. government. And again, I'm slightly paraphrasing there, but you can go back to their Wayback Machine and on their website and see exactly what they said. I had tweeted out the screenshot the other day, but regardless, they were saying that they weren't connected to the government. Fast forward about 2 years later, and they publish a press release that they are partnering with the U.S. government. They create an agreement with the U.S. Army to essentially research their metamaterials that, let's just say, are connected to extraterrestrial pieces of technology, that they have created this agreement to share the results first with the United States military. And when you do that, all of a sudden, and by the way, that line about no government oversight or however it was worded is gone from their website. And so now they've created this agreement. And now they are giving that material, which again could potentially be UAP extraterrestrial technology for all I know, they are handing it back to the military. What arguably is the capstone of this cover-up, the orchestrators, the puppet masters, whatever you want to call them, they are potentially the ones calling the shots on what we, the public, either knows or doesn't know. TTSA banks themselves on being the ones that are getting away from all that, reducing the stigma and breaking that reliance on the government to come forward. And fast forward 2 years later, they've created this agreement to give the metamaterials over to the Army and or the results or whatever will take place. But the bottom line is the military is going to find out if there is a extraterrestrial connection first. And what I will very quickly say is, let's say that is all true, and the metamaterial analysis comes back, or the analyses come back, that there is a extraterrestrial element to whatever these pieces are, one or all of them. The military is going to know first. And if you know anything about national security, and if you know anything about the history of the cover-up behind this topic, the military has 100% full power in the interest of national security to confiscate that material and classify it. And I believe that they are putting themselves in a really bad spot if they do have something. And so going back to what you say, I don't think TTSA knows what they are, because who they wanted to be nearly 2 years ago is completely contradictory to what they are doing now.
Oh, man, we didn't get to thank you for that. We didn't get a chance to talk about the FAA article. I need to take a break here. You want to hang on and come back to this?
Sure. I can hang for a few.
Let's do it. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. It's overtime with John Greenewald of the Black Vault. We'll be right back after this short break on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. You can follow John on Twitter at BlackVaultCom. The links are right there. Up in Twitter in the sandbox. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Heading into overtime. John Greenewald. He saw this coming, everybody. Come on, this isn't some big surprise. So did John, too. He gave in. John, you just rolled over, man. You just tapped out.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I told my wife, I said, yeah, I'm on till 9:30. I said, but you know what? It's Jimmy Church. He does this thing called Fade to Black Overtime. So it's probably about 10.
I owe you guys dinner, especially her. And thank you so much. And I do want everybody to go to the Black Vault. And if you haven't, if you're one of the few that haven't, get over there. It is a resource that I have spent the better part of the last 20 years going to. I remember my early comments to you. This is many years ago. What I literally said to myself, sitting in my condo, and I stumble on the Black Vault. I swear, John, I thought I was going to get a knock at the door. It was like, this can't be real. And it's called the Black Vault for a reason. This has got the secret stuff. I found my place, and everybody needs to go. The articles are great, and your new radio show is great too as well. But it is an endless amount of research. You just get going and you don't stop. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. So everybody go visit the Black Vault, which takes me to this article that you just posted. You posted this today.
Today, yeah, this was today.
And this is the headline. FAA denies tracking UFOs. Publishes database containing UFO sightings, and the quote here, and I want you to respond to this. The quote here is: the FAA does not track UFOs. Right? Okay. Please contact the National UFO Reporting Center. Right? And I thought that's kind of strange to say it like that. I didn't know that the FAA had that kind of relationship with the National UFO Reporting Center, but that was the reply that you got.
Yeah, that was the first one, and not to jump in, but very quickly, that came about, I would say, 2 months ago when I was pushing the FAA for, hey, the Navy is saying this, what about commercial pilots? And so that was it. That was the entire statement, there's two lines there, but very, very short. The FAA does not track UFOs. Please contact the National UFO Reporting Center, period. That was it. And when I got the Pentagon statements last week, which is the other article that dropped here in the last week that we've already talked about, and they kind of backtracked their previous one of their UFO comments, it was at that time when I started researching, okay, there's got to be a U.S. Air Force manual that talks about, again, that drone incursion. And so even though I'm waiting for statements, I thought I would just go on my own to research what that was, in order to kind of fast track the process and figure it out on my own. And in that process, stumbled across this FAA database doing research on various government systems. And it was about drones, UASs. And very quickly, the difference between a UAV or a drone and a UAS is that a UAV or a drone is often referred to just the craft or the drone itself, when a UAS is referring to the drone and the human operator. And so the FAA creates this database of UAS sightings. Again, that Jimmy Church that runs out to Nellis to fly his, new drone, right. That would end up in this database, essentially, if it hit the commercial side or showed up on a tower radar or something like that. And so as I'm going through this, I realized, wait a minute, there's not only UAS sightings in here, but UFOs as well. And it was completely contradictory to that very short statement that I had received. So when I found that, published it, I created a huge PDF export of all of the Excel files so people could read it a little bit more easily. And so I created that database, but then turned around and contacted the FAA. And I said, okay, you guys are saying you don't track UFOs, and yet here is a database of sightings of essentially UASs, but within that are UFO sightings that are referred to as UFOs. There are more than 260 references to unidentified objects helicopters, or aircraft, which are often referred to in UFO documents by the U.S. military as unidentified objects or unidentified aircraft, or through the 1970s, unidentified helicopters was a big one for the DOD. And so there were these weird tie-ins to the history of UFOs, but what was really interesting were the sightings were just from the last couple of years. These aren't going back to the 70s or the 60s. These are going to 2019, 2018, and then I believe the oldest one was about 2015. So very, very recent. And so, yeah, I wrote this article outlining some of the UFO cases that were within it, and then reached out to the FAA again saying, hey, this is fairly contradictory because you're saying you do not track them, and yet here are cases of you tracking them. So what's the deal? And so they got back to me and gave me the explanation.
They released the cockpit recordings from Oregon off the coast, and also Arizona and New Mexico, that flight pattern there. I think it was from Phoenix going to Santa Fe or Albuquerque. And those were about a month or two apart. And for the FAA to release those into the public domain, which were very exciting UFO sightings. I think the ones up in Oregon involved FAA team pilots back to the FAA towers. And I thought to myself then, how cool is this that the FAA is releasing current, I mean, this is real time. The events happened during that time period. UFO sightings and military and commercial pilots discussing this. But yet they want to turn around and say that they are not tracking UFOs, but yet they're releasing cockpit recordings. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, not at all. And credit to the Drive and Tyler Rogoway for breaking that Oregon story, because that was fascinating a couple years ago when he got that, just because of the information that he received, showing this contradiction that UFOs were obviously a real phenomena. Pilots are seeing them. It's on the radio. And so fast forward to now the last couple of months when I've kind of been pushing the FAA saying, what do you guys do when that happens? Because Oregon wasn't a lone incident. This is obviously happening. In the article, I outline, I didn't know this, there's 16.1 on average million flights every year handled by the FAA. That's 44,000 flights every day in the United States. That's a lot of eyeballs in the sky. And so it's only natural that UFOs would obviously be seen. And so that's what kind of boggled my mind, that they're not interested in it. Why would they forward it to a privately run civilian agency called the National UFO Reporting Center? Now, I have a lot of respect for Peter Davenport. He works very, very hard up in Washington State doing that. But why would the FAA just kind of dismiss everything? And none of that made sense to me, which is why I was kind of intrigued and surprised to find the database, that's where these UFO cases, or potentially where the UFO cases are ending up within this drone database. And they publish it publicly. I mean, this was not something I had to fight under the FOIA for. This was just by kind of a little bit of luck, I won't lie, trying to research a United States Air Force manual, but then stumbled on this obscure database hidden within FAA.gov, and kind of stumbled across that and went, wait a minute, this is pretty interesting. So I would think that the military should take the same concern, namely the U.S. Air Force. But again, it's that weird contradictory. U.S. Navy says, yes, we investigate. U.S. Air Force says, no, we don't. We have no procedures. Then on the commercial side, FAA says, we don't track those. Go to the civilian side. Oh, by the way, here's a database with a bunch of UFO encounters in it. I mean, it's like across the board, nothing makes sense anymore. I don't know who to believe.
Yeah, I want to ask Peter about this, because I think it's a very important point that the FAA, that's federal, and having an arrangement with a civilian organization that's not a government body of any kind. But that's interesting that they wouldn't be turning these reports over to, say, the Air Force or the Navy. But I'm wondering from Peter, how many reports does he get from the FAA each month? I know he's been a guest on this program. He's a great guy, and he's always on Coast to Coast. But I've never heard that reference coming from Peter that I got this report from the FAA, and this is, I wonder what that ratio is and how many reports actually come in. And that isn't under government control anymore. Peter's a civilian, and you and I can pick up the phone and ask him these questions. And I think that's a very interesting response from the FAA on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I tracked down the air traffic control manual that specifically mentions UFOs. It's Section 8 in an order they call 7110.65 for anybody taking notes. And you can download this. It's in plain sight. It's a one-page, very short section, and it's entitled Unidentified Flying Objects, and they mention the National UFO Reporting Center. But very quickly, in an article I published about I would say about a year and a half ago, I actually looked at the lineage behind some of these manuals and how they have dealt, meaning the FAA, how they have dealt with reporting. And I actually tracked back all the way to, I believe it was about 2007. It's not in front of me, but how the progression of the manuals had unfolded over the years, and how Bigelow Aerospace, starting with NIDS, then with BASS, was communicating with the FAA trying to get their information into the manual. And from about 2009 to about 2013, Bigelow Aerospace's subsidiary BASS was listed in the FAA manual, including their telephone number to report UFOs. Now, as we all know, Peter does great work and publishes his stuff public. Sadly, the BASS material, whatever went to them, is all shielded, I would guess, in whatever system they used and not public. But I actually tracked down the emails between Bigelow Aerospace and the FAA and the communications for them to change the information in the FAA manual. So it's really kind of interesting to see the progression of how the FAA has dealt with UFOs and how they have, in writing, forwarded people to privately run organizations like BASS, like the National UFO Reporting Center. But obviously, they're recording these UFO encounters in a database of their own. So it was a fairly interesting revelation to see. Now,
I'm going to read this really quick, and the date on this is 8/15/2019. So this is a recent document J07110.65Y. Section 8, Unidentified Flying Object UFO Reports. That's a pretty exciting title, isn't it, right? And this is what it says. General, A, persons wanting to report a UFO unexplained phenomena activity should contact a UFO unexplained phenomena reporting data collection center, such as the National UFO Reporting Center, etc. B, if concern is expressed that life or property might be endangered, report the activity to local law enforcement department. That's it. That's the entire page for UFO reports in the FAA manual.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And I would think, going back to those statistics of 16.1 million flights a year that the FAA is in charge of, I would think and hope that they would take these sightings more seriously. And that's how I actually ended my article by saying, if there really are UFOs of unknown origin traversing the sky, the question is, why wouldn't the government agency with a paramount interest in aviation safety be concerned and investigate each case? I fly a lot. I'd like to know that they're taking those things seriously. And yet, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like they are. And that's a concern.
We're winding down in 2019, and I thought that we would be having different conversations at this point of the year, certainly looking back to 2017 and 2018. Now we are moving into 2020. Are we hopeful Are we hopeful what 2020 is going to bring us when it comes to the question of UFOs? Or are we on that treadmill, right, that habit trail wheel, running like we have been year after year after year? What do you think is going to happen in 2020?
Well, I'm not really sure. I'm always hopeful, and I always am looking forward to something positive happening with this. And this is what I'll say in a positive note about TTSA, because it always seems like I'm being negative. They really have brought forward a story that has garnered a lot of media attention to this topic, right? So they deserve a lot of credit for that. If AATIP was not involved in UAP or UFO research, right, let's just assume for a moment that that's true. There are elements to this story that are true, which is very intriguing and encouraging for me. And that would be, again, those 3 videos that I got the U.S. Navy to say, yeah, we have no idea what those things are, that they consider them UAP. So there are positive elements to this that, even though there are other stories that maybe can be put to bed and dismissed, that they are nothing burgers, as you've called them, there are elements to this that are true, at least today anyway, according to the military, like those 3 videos and like the fact that the Navy is investigating UAPs. Those are encouraging. So what is 2020 going to bring? Will it be tied to TTSA? Well, their superfans will argue that's where all things will come from, and that's not necessarily true. I think hopefully the community as a whole will pursue these types of questions, not only with TTSA, but beyond. And so I do credit TTSA for bringing some of that stuff forward, because nothing can go against at this point that the UAP phenomena, whatever it is real, and at least one branch of the U.S. military is taking it seriously. So I scratch my head because, you've got these elements where I question Mr. Elizondo's story and the hierarchy of OSAP and AATIP and every acronym under the sun and who knows what to believe and so on. So I am very skeptical about that stuff. But there are elements to this that have been brought forward that we didn't know before December of 2017 that some have turned out to be true. And that's why I try and keep that positive outlook, and that I'm not a total negative Nancy, that this is all just bunk, because it's not. I mean, there are elements that are true. I just go back to something I've said now a few times, so don't kill me for beating the dead horse. But I just hope one day TTSA as a whole and Mr. Elizondo sits down with whomever radio host and answers some of these questions, again, on radio or television or whatever. Not these silly 3 or 4 or 5 minute pieces, where we hear the same stuff regurgitated. I'm talking about a 2-hour sit down. And talking about some of these elements that we are questioning at this point and settling them once and for all, or at least getting the other side of the story, because silence doesn't work. So that's the negative part of this. But the positive is that there are some elements that are true and that we can absolutely pursue and keep pushing for answers.
Yeah, there's it has been a very, very fun ride over this last couple of years. And it hasn't all been, for me, about TTSA. There's been a lot of other things, and I'll go over that as we wind down this year and head into 2020 and do those types of shows. But there is one very fundamental aspect to TTSA, that black cloud is going to hover forever unless these things get addressed. And that's it. And I don't think that that Elizondo, anybody, Mellon, anybody over Hal, anybody over, including DeLong, over at TTSA, really understands. They can say all that they want, that the UFO community doesn't matter. It's the big picture. We're not concerned about your questions. And they've clearly stated that. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. The more that is known and these questions that are there, that cloud, everybody that sees them on television or sees another story that pops up, we've got new T-shirts coming by. People are going to look at that and go, dude, you guys have got issues.
Yeah.
You guys have issues. You're going to be on television. You're going to go and push the marketing money to go and do that. People are going to watch that now, and they're not taking it serious. And I don't know if they realize that. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's the private planes and the money and everything else that is in around that organization where they feel that, let them eat cake, right? Yeah. That they're above anything else, and they don't need to concern themselves with any of this. And it just may be that type of elitist attitude.
Yeah, and I know you've been around the block for a long time, and so have I. I'm hitting 23 years, like I said, and that's why people like us get passionate and even emotional is a good word about this, because when they have a lack of caring and a lack of respect for a topic that deserves it, that's where I get a little heated. That's where I get a little bit passionate about it. Because there's that lack of respect, and it's that dismissal of, well, who cares about the UFO community? It's the big picture. Well, I hate to say it, the UFO community is the big picture right now. Why? Because the UFO community for decades has supported this effort for more answers and more of the truth. And if they are going to dismiss that, they are losing a lot of good people in the process. And what they are doing, whether willingly, knowingly, or whatever, they are dismissing that part of the community, but dismissing the requirement that they need to fulfill for proving what they are saying, how they are saying it, and what they want to do. And it's because the UFO community for decades has pushed for these answers, and for them to dismiss it, that's why they're making the silly mistakes that they are. And that's why they show a Mylar balloon in their opening press conference to represent the Tic Tac. That's why Mr. Elizondo points to a CGI animation in one of his presentations in Italy and says this is a real photograph from the 1952 Washington sightings. That, I believe, is what they issued an apology for. My whole point is that by dismissing decades and decades worth of research and drive and passion, they are making more mistakes than the Pentagon. And what their super fans don't realize is that the Pentagon fully admitted to making that mistake, and they blacklist them. TTSA makes a mistake, and they're heralded as being the most honest group out there. And it's that hypocrisy that is going to hurt this field. And that is what leads me to be passionate about it, you to be passionate. And it goes back to that lack of caring for the topic that deserves a heck of a lot more.
Thank you so much, John. And don't ever stop. And I know that you won't. All right.
I never will. I love it, man. I get a kick out of this. I love speaking to people like you about it. And obviously to those who care to listen, I just have a blast. So absolutely. I'm not going anywhere.
No, I wanted to say this. I was going to say this earlier, and I've only got 60 seconds. I'm going to get this out quick. The audience needs to know that you and I on the phone have probably disagreed far more than we have agreed with each other. Right? Yeah. There has been some moments but it has it's talking through it, and we accept each other's positions. It's not all roses. The bottom line is we're just trying to get to these answers, not only with TTSA or Lazar or Billy Meyer or whatever, just whatever. It's not about that. It's that we know the phenomena is real. We need to get it addressed. Let's figure this thing out. It's a lot of fun. It's the journey that we're on. But being negative and attacking each other, it gets us absolutely nowhere. Community first. And thank you for that, John. You're the best.
It's my pleasure. You as well. Thank you, Jimmy. Anytime. I love being here. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
John Greenewald, The Black Vault. Thank you so much, John. And theblackvault.com, very simple. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. I got to thank John's wife for letting him do overtime tonight. Theblackvault.com. You can follow John on Twitter at blackvaultcom. It's all right there. And this is my takeaway, and that I want everybody to please hear me. Everything that I speak about where I lose interest in something, or I use the words like pull the plug, or my interest is fading, I don't have the energy to apply to everything, right? And if I lose interest and the energy is out, I'm trying to figure out. I've seen way too many crazy things. Right? I need to worry about what I have seen, the things that you have seen, the things that you have experienced. That's what I'm out here to do, right? I'm trying to figure all of this out, and I'm not going to waste my time on something that just doesn't feel right to me. And that's it. Life is way too short. I've only got so many days on this planet, and I'm going to spend my energy in the right areas. And that's what Fade to Black is all about, and you can always count on that. That's why I love this audience. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night is Fader night. Open lines all night long. Get ready. It's my favorite night of the week, besides tonight. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.